In the late 1950s, when Fidel Castro was taking his revolution out of the mountains toward the ultimate victory of Havana, the world watched what was believed to be a popular uprising of the people.
There is not communism or Marxism in our ideas. Our political philosophy is representative democracy and social justice in a well-planned economy.
But the revolution provided a new base for the KGB and the communist intelligence networks. Ladislav Bittman was a deputy director with Czech intelligence.
A few years after the revolution, the Czechs helped to build up the Cuban intelligence service. And then, I think in the early 1960s, the Soviets took over completely when Cuba was really in the hands of the Soviet bloc, the Soviet Union.
Here at the Cuban mission to the United Nations in New York City, where 98 Cuban nationals work, at least half are members of the DGI, the Cuban Intelligence Service. This man is Nestor Garcia. Until the summer of 1980, he was officially listed as the first secretary to the Cuban mission. But in reality, he was chief of station for Cuban intelligence in New York City. In Moscow, the direct responsibility for running Cuban intelligence is assigned to Department 11 of the KGB, the same department that controls the Czechs, Poles, and other European communist intelligence agencies. Since the late 1960s, Soviet KGB officers living in Havana have directly run the operation of Cuban intelligence. As a result of 2 years' research, the Connections team has been able to ascertain these startling facts. Cuban intelligence was taken over by the Soviets in 1969. At that time, it became and has remained totally financed and controlled by the KGB. Now living in hiding, this man is the highest-ranking Cuban officer to defect to the United States. This is the first known television interview that a DGI officer has given.
In Moscow, I was trained in recruiting of agents, in infiltrating the CIA, in counterintelligence.
Was all your training directed at the United States? All your training in Moscow directed at the United States?
Even if the work dealt with operations in Italy, France, England, Canada, it was ultimately directed against the United States. In the case of a plan of sabotage against an American embassy, the physical layout of the plant had to be known.
Was there any other installations than embassies that were looked at for sabotage?
All the big American companies.
Since the late 1960s, General Semenov of the KGB has controlled the DGI from Havana for the Soviets.
General Simonov, the Soviet chief, would be the one who would give the order.
So the Russians controlled Cuban intelligence, actually controlled?
Totally and absolutely.
The second most important base of Cuban intelligence in North America is the Cuban consulate in Montreal. From here and other Cuban diplomatic missions, the DGI conducts intelligence and espionage operations through a spy network designed to increase the KGB's penetration of North American life.
You saw the files of these people in Havana, correct?
Yes, I know many.
Were they working, for instance, trying to get defense secrets from America?
Yes, definitely so.
What else?
¿Qué otra cosa?
Información política.
Political information, economic information, leftist movements in the United States, on the blacks.
Información sobre las plantas de...
Industrial plants of the United States, like power plants and so on and so forth.
Why would they be interested in power plants?
This information is necessary to the Soviets.
This former DGI officer was shown the official list of the 12 Cubans stationed in Washington at the Cuban Interest Section.
How many on that list do you know as being in intelligence?
Four.
There are 4 on that list.
Certainly, certainly.
Have you ever heard of a Mr. Ricardo Escartin?
Sí, es oficial de inteligencia.
He's an intelligence officer.
How about Mr. Juan Carbonell?
Juan Carbonell es otro oficial de inteligencia.
Juan Carbonell is another intelligence officer who was in Jamaica.
Jeju Arbalea?
También.
Also.
Mr. Martinez?
Sí, ese es otro oficial de inteligencia.
Yes, this is another officer of the DGI.
6 months after this interview, Ricardo Escartin was expelled from the U.S. for espionage activities. But the other DGI officers, Carbonell, Arbolea, and Martinez, are still operating in Washington. In the mid-1960s, the black ghettos of America erupted in flames and violence in an apparently spontaneous protest. The riots did not need instigation by outside elements, yet once the conditions were ripe, revolutionaries of the left moved in, funded and supported by the Cuban DGI. One such revolutionary was Philip Luce.
What was the nature of your meeting with Fidel Castro?
Our nature, first of all, was we met a number of times, but our first meeting dealt with what the group would do in Cuba. Secondly was what we could do in the United States once we returned. And third of all, we received over $20,000 to bring back to the United States. The next year, we were engaged in tremendous riots in New York City, which then spread to Cleveland, to Los Angeles, to other areas. Agitation at that juncture was vital, not only to our cause, but to the cause of the Cubans. We trained people in the use of weapons. We also trained people on how to stand on top of their tenement buildings and throw down garbage cans filled with bricks. We also taught them how to make Molotov cocktails. As a matter of fact, the Cubans at that time said to us, your revolution is your own revolution. But while we were in Cuba, they gave us money to bring back to the United States to be utilized in terrorist activities. They also invited us to the embassy, wherein they gave us money to send young Americans to Cuba who were later trained in terrorist activities. We went to the Cuban embassy on a number of occasions to get funding.